Hello, this is Ed Rigsbee, and we're ready for a Cigar Peg virtual speaker showcase, which is a live showcase. All of the people in this showcase will become nominees for the 2022 Virtual Speakers Hall of Fame. Appreciate you taking the time to be here, and just to make sure that everybody knows, this is a venture of a nonprofit, and all of the speakers that you will see, you will have the ability to connect with them directly. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into it right away. Our first speaker is Chuck Gallagher. He's an American entrepreneur, speaker, and author. He is the author of Second Chances and has been featured in media outlets including Life and Health, Small Business Opportunities, Business Week, CBS, NBC, Lifetime, and National Public Radio. As a business ethics speaker and the author, his clients include Medtronic, the FBI, the U.S. Navy, University of Florida, and over 320 associations nationwide. Chuck is the president of the Ethics Resource Group and the vice president of a public company. I give you Chuck Gallagher.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, every choice has a consequence. On October 2nd, 1995, I took 23 physical steps. And as I took those steps, I thought about my wife, thought about my two children, Rob and Alex. They were just little tykes at the time. I thought about my career. At that time, I was tax partner in a CPA firm. I had testified before Congress, written articles in national magazines, taught continuing education courses in 30 states. I was Chuck Gallagher. I was a somebody. On that day, I thought about the church where I had been music director for 12 years. I literally thought about everything that defined my life. But on that day, as I took those steps, on the 24th step, I reached out my hand, I pushed open the door, and I stepped in to federal prison. On that day, I became 11-642-058, an inmate, what most people would define as a nobody. You see, every choice has a consequence. Now, I know it's a little unusual in a virtual event like this to think about starting off with somebody with a background like I have. But when you think about and you begin the idea of talking about ethics, sometimes it's important to understand why smart people might make dumb choices that could end you up like this. So let me do this. In the time we've got, I want to ask you a couple of questions, okay? First question I've got is, how many of you would voluntarily choose to make an unethical choice? Now, in a true virtual event, we have a way to make this interactive, whether it's chat or via text in most cases, so it keeps some anonymity, but we get opportunities for people to answer the question. Now, most people do not raise their hand on this question, okay? But the second question gets a little more response. The second question becomes, how many of you think that voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Now, in that case, we start to get a few more hands. Okay, but let's play with the third question. Third question that typically comes up is, and how many of you have driven on the interstate highway over the past 2 weeks? Okay, now everybody here is probably going to say, yeah, of course, I've driven on the highway in the last 2 weeks. And sometimes, in fact, most times, if you want to know the truth, you can look out and you can see people that are smiling. It's like they're psychic because they know the very next question that's going to take place. And that is, and how many of you have exceeded the speed limit by, we'll say, 5 to 10? And in most cases, everybody raises their hand. In fact, in one of the last events, there was a gentleman back there and he said, over 9, you're mine, under 9, you're fine. And apparently he had been a police officer in a former life. But think about the questions that we just walked through. Would you make an unethical choice? Most people say no. Do you think breaking the law is unethical? Yes, except we all do that functionally every day. In fact, here's the truth. It is easy to make unethical choices when those choices seem to be socially acceptable. Now, because of the time that we have, I want to take a little pause. Okay. I want to pause this and say it's important now for us to understand why we're even having this discussion. And here's a true statement. The Department of Justice, over the course of 2022, has had multiple times where they have stated that past administrations may not have been interested in what the rules are and you following them, but we're a new administration and we care. So let me play this out. Basically, the Department of Justice has said, we are now looking. And I'm going to be really candid and say, the reality, since we've lived through a pandemic, is at this point, they're looking and we need to pay attention because it is going to be interesting over the next several years. Now, let me be really practical for a second. Ethical lapses don't start big. That is not true. They don't. In fact, there are 3 primary reasons why people will have an ethical lapse. And in what normally takes place in a virtual event, we're going to peel back the layers of the onion. We're going to talk about why is it that really smart people might make choices that could end up in outcomes that are, well, let's say less than desirable. Now, let me ask this question. Why is ethical training important? There are a multitude of reasons. One of which, by the way, is you probably don't want to end up in, the news media. And of course, everybody today, as long as you've got a camera, you're in the news media when something takes place. Breaking news happens, and we see it every day reported by just ordinary citizens. The other is, by the way, just to be really practical, you probably don't want to end up facing the judge. Now, in a normal presentation, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about what can take place, what the process is that people go through quite naturally that can lead us from a choice that we don't even think about to an outcome that becomes, again, less than desirable. And let me be really practical because I'm going to illustrate this quickly. Number one, we get in our car. We have a need to go from point A to point B. B, we have the opportunity in the car to exceed the speed limit. I mean, the speedometer has, 160 on it. 3, we speed because everybody does it. I mean, it's no big deal. And then when there is no result, when there is no impact, when there's no ticket, we understand, well, we can repeat it. That's a process. But here's something that's critically important as we start to wind things down. And let me make this large enough to be able to see. The United States sentencing guidelines say that if you have an effective compliance and ethics program, it should prevent and detect criminal conduct and promote an organizational culture that encourages ethical conduct and a commitment to compliance. What I bring to the table is the ability to, in fact, create that within the organization. Those are the things that we need to focus on. So in the short period of time we have, I started with a statement and I want to end with that statement. And that is, every choice has a consequence. My name is Chuck Gallagher, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to be with you here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate that. Moving to our next speaker. Have you ever wanted to do more, especially when given less to work with? Do you try to deliver solutions that will actually be used long after the project finishes? And do you just like having more fun, no matter what work has thrown at you? Jamie Champagne is that person who enjoys doing all this daily, diving into IT to help teams deliver measurable results, an accomplished speaker, a trainer, author. When she's not excitedly solving technical challenges, you can find her on the Hawaiian waters with her family on a surfboard. I give you Jamie Champagne.
Thank you, Ed. Technology projects seem to be one of the hardest things to actually complete these days. Like, we can build skyscrapers in the blink of an eye, but to get rid of that paper in an organization, like, that's a whole nother can of worms. But look around your desk right now. How many of you have a smart device within arm's reach at all times? Or how many of us are even wearing our digital technology? And do you know who you are when you've left the house without your digital leash and freak out, right? See, technology is everywhere, and there's no escaping it. It's the tool, the vehicle, even the end product that are the livelihood of many organizations today, and especially tomorrow. Yet I'm not talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, and please don't get me started about cryptocurrencies. I'm simply talking about online forms, status tracking, task management, simple activities we've come to expect in our solutions. Yet so many organizations struggle to move from their Excel spreadsheets and paper receipts to these digital solutions. So why is that? Why a day of interconnectivity that puts more information at your fingertips than ever before? We still struggle to help these technology projects deliver on time, on budget, and anywhere near original scope. And no, we're not being agile when we're completely lost. The key to all this insanity, though, is collaboration. See, business analysts like myself were originally hired to literally translate the geek speak to the business and back. Translators, order takers, and testers. Just make the teams work together and move on, right? We realized quickly that doesn't work. Being a ping pong ball does not move the game forward. To be successful, we realized we needed both the IT and the business in the same room at the same time. Sure, we're still translating that acronym alphabet soup, but the role shifted and is exactly the skill set that the IT projects need to get it done. No pun intended. See, the collaborators realized they needed to be able to facilitate elicitation, verification, validation. Those are the activities and focus of these roles. Can you literally get everyone on the same sheet of music, literally the same page? It kills me when IT is so proud of a design that gets absolutely no feedback from the business, because the business users have no clue what they're looking at. Or the business, they're going to explain this $1 million idea that's going to make a ton of customers delighted and excited. And the IT team goes back and stares at a blank wall. See, they're lacking understanding. And that understanding comes through that collaboration. That's what I teach. It's what I preach. It's what I beseech of teams, to focus on understanding outcomes, to get focused on production and value delivery, rather than simply being busy and doing status reports. Status reports don't get the project done. Prototypes with interactive feedback and facilitative walkthroughs of the customer journey, those deliver real results. Now, the trouble in these magical roles and mythical creatures is there's no ownership in these facilitative roles, no operational day-to-day management, so they're often elusive. And while a role doesn't have to exist in your organization, the skill set does. Who on your team can walk into any area of the business and know how to ask great questions to learn about who the area is and what they do and value? Do you have testers that actually learn the system and know not just how things work, but why they are the way they are? And are these people in trusting relationships to ask if that's how things really should be? And they could do all of this in a matter of days or even minutes. See, this is where I get excited. Technology projects succeed when the business value is traced through every aspect of technological design and implementation, and is only successful as a solution when you intertwine the business processes in all aspects of your technical conversations. This is a two-way street that comes in a wildly collaborative package of how to make your IT project succeed. And even cooler is you can do all of this in a planned, mapped out, waterfall, predictive type of approach, or hang on for that wild ride, fly by the seat of your pants, agile methods, or anywhere in between on the spectrum. It's all still works if your teams are collaborating. Sure, we can do trainings on chat applications and play with virtual meeting softwares that I love. And sure, let's learn a few tweaks, on the hybrid environments. But the training I love, the training I see that is so needed is that facilitative collaboration skill set. Can you get people to talk with each other versus at each other? I'd love to explore how we could get hands-on and practice in safe environments on real-world work for you and your teams, such that they are the ones pulling the teams together. They'll make their project managers' lives so much easier by getting the understanding of all involved. And not just the immediate team, but the entire project team and even the business areas. We want them focused on the target of the effort versus the work required. Things aren't work when you're having fun and enjoying it. That's the feeling I love to create, to generate buy-in, ownership, and really excitement for the great work being done. And that's the part to remember. What gets done gets paid. What gets done gets repeated. And I want to be the one to help you get more of it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate that. As we move on, the next presenter is Richard Melancon, CPA. Richard serves clients across the U.S. and is available virtually or on site. Of all the business topics that Richard presents, this topic on understanding financial statements is unique. It focuses on helping decision makers to understand how to read the accounting reports, not just the financial numbers. Specifically, it explores the story behind the numbers. I give you Richard Melancon.
Thank you, Ed. I work with clients on a daily basis. And the first thing we do is we pull out the financial statements, use that as a basis for our conversations. We talk about the business challenges of the day, where the businesses want to go, what their hopes are for the next year. And when they're looking through the financial statements, the first thing they'll do is go to the income statement, go down to the bottom line, read that net profit number, then give me the statements back, and they're ready to move on. They're ready to move on to the next item on the agenda. And I get a little disappointed from time to time when I see that. And I mainly see that from newer clients, not clients I've been working with for a while, because the newer clients are unable to read the information that's available in the rest of the statements. So they focus on one number that they're comfortable with, and they're ready to move on. Now, I understand that it's difficult to read financial statements when you're not trained to do that. The numbers don't seem to relate to reality. The decision makers haven't had any formal training in the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement and all the other numbers that are on there. And the accounting numbers are in accounting terms. They're using accounting rules, and they use accounting concepts that's in a world of its own. It doesn't relate to the way people are managed. It doesn't relate to the way products are delivered to customers. So I understand the frustration of decision makers when they're trying to make decisions. They're looking for information to make that decisions, and it's right there in front of them, but they don't understand how to read it. There is more information in the accounting system, the accounting reports, than in any other single source of information in the business. And to put that aside and not use that information really puts companies at a disadvantage. Those companies that are able to analyze their financial statements tend to be far and ahead, above and beyond those of their competitors. The larger companies have entire departments to analyze the financial statements, not to prepare them, not to submit them, but to analyze the financial statements. And the decision makers in every company should be able to analyze those parts of the financial statements that relate to them. Now, let me take a step back and give you a little bit about my background to show you why I feel so passionate about this topic. When I was in college, I started in the management program, and I went on to finish the MBA. And I went out to work, and it wasn't until I was out working that I realized that I had no background, no understanding of the financial statements. In my management program, which I learned a lot, it was about people, it was about processes, it was about equipment, but it wasn't about accounting. In the MBA program, it was about financing, it was about investing, about return on investment, about mergers and acquisitions, but it was not about accounting. Now, I had an opportunity to go back and go through the accounting program, and I did become a CPA. And through that process, I learned how to read the financial statements. And I also started to appreciate how difficult it was to run a business without that level of understanding. Now, I don't think that decision makers should be accountants. I do not think that decision makers should learn how to become a bookkeeper. Decision makers in departments should do what they do in their job. If you're a warehouse manager, you should manage the warehouse. If you're a marketing sales vice president, you should manage the marketing function. But if you cannot pull that part of the financial statements out that relate to your function in the business, then you're missing so much rich information that you can use as a basis for your decisions moving forward to help your company move and grow. And for that reason, we put together a series of programs to help decision makers learn how to read financial statements, learn how to understand how the statements relate to their department, their function, and their decisions moving forward. These programs they're not academic, they're reality-based. We don't spend time on the debits and the credits. We don't try to ask the decision makers to become bookkeepers. We try to move away from the numbers. In fact, we use stories, vignettes, examples that relate to their everyday activity. We want to know what your position is in your business so that we can relate the financial statements to how you make decisions. When we do that, the numbers support the stories not supporting the numbers. And then you make the connection. You make the connection with the decision makers that the statements really can support the decisions they're trying to make. We feel that now, more than ever, this information is important to all decision makers among your members. If your members are trying to grow, or in the new year 2023, if they're trying to stay in a stable position, because we are about to go into a recession. In a recession, those companies that are marginally healthy will fail. Those companies that are trying to grow will probably be frustrated. And those companies that are stable will remain and watch their competitors drift away. So as an association, if you want to provide the best benefits to your members, then focusing on helping members become the best company that they can be next year to become stable in a downward recession could be some of the best beneficial programs that you can offer. And we would like to discuss how our programs can assist you in that mission. My name is Richard Melancon. I would be happy to talk to you about these programs or any of the keynotes, and our keynotes are not accounting related, so that you can present to your members some new concepts and new ways to help make better decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Next speaker is Lisa Ryan, CSP. She is the Chief Appreciation Strategist at Grategy. She is a certified professional speaker, a certified virtual speaker, and the best-selling author of 11 books. Lisa helps her clients keep their top talent from becoming someone else's. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Ryan.
I want you to think back to your first day in your industry. Now, you might be saying, Lisa, I don't even remember what I had for lunch last week versus my first day in the industry. Just work with me. So whether you showed up at the office or the plant or the job site, you're looking around. Am I going to like these people? Am I going to like my boss? Am I going to like the work, the company, the mission? But there was something about the industry brought you in. It was probably the workplace culture that kept you. I remember my first day. I was in the welding industry. Now I get there and I am the only woman in this room full of guys. And I'm looking around going, what in the world was I thinking? I mean, I knew what a weld was because I live in Northeast Ohio, and welds are the things that hold together the roller coasters at Cedar Point Amusement Park. But how they got there, I had no idea. So we went through training and we learned all the different processes, MIG, TIG, stick. We learned metal prep. We learned joining dissimilar metals and maintenance welding. But it wasn't until I put on that helmet, which I would do, but I'm having a really good hair day today. and I put that down and I struck my first arc. And I saw that red metal starting to flow. And I heard that sound and that very distinctive weld smell that if you're not familiar with it, think the 4th of July and lots of fireworks. And then when I lifted up that helmet and took that chipping hammer, chipped away the slag to see, is it a beautiful bead or not? It was then I fell in love with the industry. But it was the culture and my boss that kept me there. Now you might be saying, Lisa, what in the world does welding have to do with employee retention and engagement, for goodness sake? It has everything. And if you're not familiar with the welding process, you have two pieces of metal and you use a third alloy to join them together using a heat process. So we can use this as an analogy. If you have that one piece of metal is your employee and the other piece of metal is the job, that alloy is everything else. It's your workplace culture, it's your leadership team, it's the coworkers, it's the mission. When fusion happens, now that is what a beautiful weld looks like. I would not be able to break that weld if I took a sledgehammer to it. Let's look at this as that rock star employee. You know, you're not afraid to send them out to be in front of your customers. Their colleagues like working with them. They are more productive than the money that you are paying them, and they are not going to go down the street for 50 cents more an hour. On the other hand, when fusion doesn't happen, now I could probably break that weld with a small chipping hammer, but let's look at that as that toxic, horrible employee who sucks the life out of the room when they come into the room. Their coworkers hate working with them. You're afraid to send them out in front of clients or customers because you have no idea what they say or will do. And when that person starts causing people to leave, think about it. Who leaves? Best employees or worst employees? Your best employees. You can't afford to keep those people. And in a market where it's hard enough to find people, much less keep them, that's what we have to focus on. So in my programs, we work with strategies because workplace culture is everyone's responsibility. There's strategies for the C-suite to help that organization to create the type of workplace culture that keeps your top talent from becoming someone else's. It's that middle, that management team. And you know that employees don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers. We work with strategies for them and the individual contributors because we all play a role. And I do it through the use of gratitude strategies or gratagees, including things like accessibility. Do your people have access to you? Because think about it. Employees these days, they've had access to leadership since they were this high. I mean, when I was young, my parents would be like, we're going on vacation to Florida. These days, parents are saying, it's your turn to pick where we're going on vacation. Where would you like to go? They've had access. So when you have that brand new employee who walks into your office after a week on the job and says, you know what, see some things that can help. And you're doing everything in your power so your eyes do not roll back in your head. Listen to them because they see the world differently. Training, investing in your team members. And you might be saying, Lisa, if I spend all that money on training, they're just going to take that and leave anyway. Well, what if you don't invest in them and they stay? In my programs, again, you'll have lots of strategies, not only from my experience for doing this for the past 12 years. Also, we take advantage of the wisdom in the room so you can see what your colleagues and other people in your industry are doing. And finally, we acknowledge excellence. We look for ways to catch our employees in the act of doing things well. One of my favorite studies was done by Marshall Asada, and he looked at team productivity. And on high performing teams, there was a 6-to-1 positivity ratio. What does that mean? For every one negative response, people on that team would get 6 positives. And it wasn't all, oh, yay, everything you do is so good. It's like, it's a good start to an idea. Let's see how we can build on it. It's respectful communication. On an average performing team, that number drops in half, 3 positives for every 1 negative. And you know what? That's where your quiet quitters are hanging out. These are the people that are doing exactly enough work so that they don't get fired. And you're probably paying them exactly enough so that they don't quit. But on a low performing team, it's 0.3-to-1. They're hearing 3 times more negatives than positives. So in my sessions, whether they are live on stage or virtual, I will leave your audience, your participants with real world strategies that they can use immediately. I'm Lisa Ryan. I would love to work with you and your teams, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate you also. As we move on, our next speaker is Nora Burns. She has built a career helping organizations reimagine the employee experience. She has conducted primary research as the undercover candidate and the undercover employee, including participating in over 250 job interviews, not as herself, and working the front lines of 8 organizations that did not know her as a former Fortune 200 executive or workplace culture expert, but strictly as the cashier, the customer service rep, the warehouse employee, the driver, etc. Her insights are a blend of education, experience, and this proprietary undercover research. When she's not helping clients enhance their workplace culture, you'll find Nora wandering, walking trails in Colorado, with a cup of coffee in one hand and the dog lead in the other. Please help me welcome Nora Burns.
Thanks, Ed. As the undercover candidate, I have applied for a vast array of jobs, from production manager and director of operations, baker, housekeeper, director of IT, that's a bad choice, accountant, the list goes on. But I may have applied and interviewed with you, with your organization, with one of your member organizations, or your favorite brand. But you'll never know for sure because I don't disclose the names of the organizations where I interviewed, nor where I worked as the undercover employee. Because this research is not about blame and shame and pointing fingers. It's about collectively getting information, real truthful information about our workplace cultures, about the trends in the workplace, about why people leave, why people stay, and what candidates and employees are truly experiencing. Now, when I started this research as the undercover candidate years ago, I put together a research plan. I talked with HR peers, with business experts and business coaches, and of course, with ethicists. I didn't accept so much as a cup of coffee from any of the organizations where I interviewed as the undercover candidate. Once the plan was in play, and I set forth on this research, one of the first things I needed to do was travel out of state, because I didn't want my experiences and my examples to only be from Colorado. And I decided for my first interviewing trip, I would go back to my home state of Wisconsin, where I was born and raised. Yeah, some of you already guessed that, because you can take the woman out of Wisconsin, but you cannot take the out of her voice. So I go back to my home state of Wisconsin for this first set of a dozen interviews. Along the way, I stay with family and friends, and I even go back to my hometown and pick up a block of Colby cheese from Widmer's Cheese Factory and a giant chocolate eyeball from the chocolatier in town. When I finish all of the interviews and my visits with family and friends, I go back to Denver, Colorado by way of Chicago O'Hare. Now, when I go through TSA, I take my phone and I put it in that giant dog bowl that is going to transport it through the X-ray machine, followed by my carry-on bag. When I get to the other side, I look in and my phone is there, but my carry-on, it's going for a second time in the machine. So I just pick up my phone and I start retrieving messages and responding to messages, and the bag's going to come. I've got plenty of time. For once, I'm early to the airport, so I'm not worried. Until Michael captures my attention. Michael is a TSA agent who stands about 6'4", 5'5". And as he towers over my 5'2" frame, he says, "Is this your bag?" "Yes." "Is there anything suspicious or sharp in it that I should know about before I do a hand search of the bag?" "No." So he goes off with my bag and I go back into my phone. And as I start reading a message, into my mind floats the image of the interior of that bag. My interview clothes, a couple of books, notebook, giant block of cheese, chocolate eyeball, and nestled next to them is one of the key components of my undercover research toolkit. I motion to get Michael's attention, but it's too late. He has already unzipped the bag, folded back the flap, and discovered the offending item. Michael pulls up with his frame and he turns to me holding a plastic gallon bag filled with 25 disposable cell phones. Okay, so these cell phones are all what I needed as undercover candidate, right? You need to call the candidate, you need to call the references. There's a lot of phones required. And each one of these has on it the name of the candidate, their phone number, their email address. This looks weird. Michael turns to me and he's holding this up and he simply looks and points and says, "Ma'am." And I said the one and only thing that I could think of at that moment. Match.com. Now, thankfully, Michael appreciated my humor in the moment. And as it turns out, it is perfectly legal to travel with 25 disposable cell phones in your carry-on bag. Highly suspicious, but legal. So that was just one of the things that I learned as I started this experiment. I always need to be early to the airport for secondary screening. Now, in years before, I have been the executive. I have spent a lot of time on executive row and in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 organizations, helping them strategize around their people elements of their business. Now, there's a magic that happens in the boardroom, and I find that time really insightful and invigorating. But I believe that it is truly that combination where boardroom and break room meet, where we understand both in full, where true operational magic happens. And I learned a lot of that when I changed from my executive wear into the polyester of the frontline employee. Now, in addition to learning that I needed to arrive to security in plenty of time for secondary screening, because let's just accept I'm always going to be going through secondary screening, I also learned some important things that will be helpful for your organizations. That in A/B testing of resumes, those resumes submitted with male names will have a 60% higher chance of a positive result than those submitted with traditionally female names. I learned that 80% or more of interviews start late, and that those candidates are left waiting in rooms with financial data, the P&L, with confidential information about the organization, and unlocked laptops. I uncovered a correlation between the Yelp score of your business and employee satisfaction and your organizational turnover. I learned the moment that the hiring manager decided they were absolutely hiring me. And I could say almost anything after that point, and they would still move forward with the offer. I have a unique balance of this experience as an executive with the Fortune 500, as years of consulting and practicing as an HR executive, and my research for years as the undercover candidate and the undercover employee. I have the data that your teams need. I have the experience and the tools to help them implement it for successful completion. And I have the stories. I have the stories they need to hear. I'm Nora Burns with the Leadership Experts. I look forward to working with you soon. Thank you.
Nora, thanks so much. We're going to take a little break here and take a little different direction in the middle of the showcase, and then we'll repeat at the end. So one of the things that you probably read in meetings industry magazines left and right is that the newer crew of people attending your meetings, they want interaction. And if you're not going to give them interaction, well, then they may just check out. Our next speaker is a master of that interaction. He attends your meeting, he summarizes what happened, and then offers a humorous monologue at lunch or dinner or whatever breaks. His name is Dale Irvin, and he's the only professional summarizer that I know of, not only in the United States, but the whole world. I'll let Dale tell you more about what he does and give you an example. Dale Irvin.
Thank you, Ed. And I appreciate all of you people who are watching us live, because that really is why we do this. One thing Ed forgot to mention on my introduction, which he always does, is that I am not eligible for the Virtual Speaker Hall of Fame. because I'm already in it. Okay, I just came back to do this because it's fun. This is what I do. I come to your meeting. I listen to all the speakers. I attend all the events. I look at everything the attendees look at. And then once or twice a day, I will give them an update, a summary, an editorial, as it were, of what they just experienced, had they been paying attention. Now, we found over the years that when I do this, people stay until the end of the meeting so that they can hear it. They talk amongst themselves about what that goofy guy on the stage said. They laugh, which is always a bond. And most importantly, they remember the important points when they hear them back with humor. That being said, and by the way, I pack them in just like this wherever I go. That being said, let me give you a quick summary of everything I have heard this morning. All right, first of all, we heard from Chuck Gallagher, also known as number 116-42058. And he said that every choice has a consequence. So if you make a choice, I guess, to be a CPA, you're going to prison. That's what I took out of that. I wasn't really sure. And he was talking about how many people speed on the highway. And of course, everybody does. And he said that a police officer said to him, over 9, you're mine. Under 9, you're fine. And I have about 4, possibly 5 punchlines to that, none of which are fit for this particular time. So if you want to hear them, please drop me a line, because some are quite funny. And finally, so Chuck, his program really should be titled, Don't Want to Go to Prison? Don't Do Bad Stuff. So that's something everybody should know. Then we heard from Jamie Champagne, who lives over in Hawaii. And if she's not working, according to Ed's introduction, you can find her with her family on a surfboard. Must be one really big surfboard. I mean, fit the whole reunion on there. And she said that technology is our digital. By the way, I took all these notes. Oh, you can't see it, but I took all these notes just now as I was listening. Technology is our digital lease. We have smart devices everywhere we go. Well, of course we do. What are we supposed to carry, a deck of cards to play solitaire? No, I don't think so. And she talked about collaboration between IT and business in the same room with a ping pong ball. I got a little confused there, I'll be honest with you. And I have to tell you, at first, when I first heard the term IT, I didn't know what it was. IT, what does that mean? And then I go back to the words of former President Bill Clinton when he said, it all depends on what the meaning of the word is. So, that's a quick flashback for people with memories. And finally, she said, get it done at the end, get it done, which is the motto at the bakery. All right. Then we heard from Richard Melancon, who is also a CPA, but has not been to prison yet. And he said that it's difficult to read a financial statement if you're not trained to do it. But if you are trained to do it, reading a financial statement is just boring. So you got that. And he said, you need to analyze your financial statements. Or in my case, in my business, I need to make one. I got a checkbook. That's my financial statement right there. And then he said, decision makers do what they do. Or should do what they do. Decision makers should do what they do. So make decisions. Flip a coin, spin a wheel. Come on, make a choice. And that's what I got from Richard. Next. Oh, we heard from my friend Lisa Ryan. She said, think of your first day in the industry. Hers was in the welding industry. Mine was in a cemetery. That was my first exposure to the cemetery industry. And where our motto is, we're the last people to let you down. and we think about what you learned on that first day. I learned all about shovels. that's pretty much all there was. And then she talked about the weld smell. Sounds like a new fragrance for the holidays. And then the culture is everyone's responsibility. Culture is, which is why somebody's always stealing the yogurt out of the break room. They want more culture. I know that's a groaner, but it made me laugh, and that's all that's important. And today, people, when we were kids, parents told us where we were going. Today, they ask their kids where they want to go. My parents did that to me once. Says, where do you want to go on vacation? I said, Hawaii. They said, well, you better get started. And finally, she appreciates us. Thank you very much, Lisa. It's good to be appreciated. We appreciate you. Finally, we heard from Nora Burns, who is an undercover employee or candidate, aka spy. And she applies for a lot of jobs, but I bet you never applied for a job as a welder. So there you go. And she's very adamant about this, that she has never accepted a cup of coffee during an interview. I've never been offered one. Okay, what the heck? It's just rude if somebody offers you one and you don't take it. And you can take the woman out of Wisconsin, but you can't make her stop drinking beer. And then she got stopped by TSA in Chicago, who wanted to go through her bag and found, a brick of cheese and a chocolate eyeball, which really should be enough to stop anybody. But then they pulled out a bag with 25 cell phones. And she said, Match.com. And I think I would have said, you want a free phone? And so now she plans to go through secondary screening when she goes to the airport. Because I'll tell you, from personal experience, you cannot beat a good strip search at the airport. Okay, that's a fun time. Anyhow, my friends, that is what I summarized the first half of our little session, our showcase here. I will be back at the end to summarize the other speakers. So thank you very much for joining me. And oops, I guess it's over here. That's how you can get a hold of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on. Our next speaker is the CEO of the Austin Technology Council and is a professional keynote speaker who is focused on helping organizations build community. He's the author of 4 books and is the host of several popular podcasts. Please help me welcome Thom Singer.
We all know that the world has changed drastically in the last few years, and it's going to continue to change more as we move forward. We are in an era of very fast acceleration, and you cannot sit still. The pandemic, the fears of recession, remote work, and the entire move to virtual that has happened has really caused a lot of changes to the association world. In fact, many people predicted that the demise of associations was coming like a train through a tunnel right towards all of us who run membership organizations. Now, I actually believe the opposite is true. I think now is a pivotal time in history for membership and trade associations because people are craving connection. It was about 15 years ago that social media found its way into our lives. We started getting Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of these, and LinkedIn, and all of these tools that we received, we were told were going to change the way people network and connect and find new business. But when I speak to audiences, I ask people, how many of you just have so much business coming at you because you have a LinkedIn profile? Or when you tweet, how many just online sales happen for your company? Now, the truth is, there are some people who raise their hand when I say that because there are outliers out there who have capitalized on how to use social media to market their business. But for the most of us, for the average person, these are wonderful tools, but they haven't really shifted the game and they haven't replaced the need for human connection. My name is Thom Singer, and I have been speaking to audiences for over 12 years about the power of human relationships in business and how to create a stronger inner circle that's going to help you have more success and help your companies thrive. Because anytime we bring people together, that's when the magic can happen. I talk about community, collaboration, and conversations as the way to solve all problems. So if you're part of an association, that's really your role. We exist to help build community in the industries that we serve. That's one of the main reasons that people join. And if they come together and form community, then the opportunity to collaborate can really happen. And when people will sit down and talk about those hard things, those topics that sometimes we shy away from, When people will have those hard conversations, we can fix every problem in our association, in our industry, and I want to argue in our world. Imagine for a minute if our Congress in the United States actually thrived on being a community that collaborated and that had conversations. That would change everything that's coming out of Washington, D.C. And the same thing is true in your association and the companies who belong to your group. So what do? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to embrace this point that there is more loneliness and disconnectedness in the world now than there ever has been. In fact, a few years ago, Dr. Vivek Murthy, the current Surgeon General of the United States, and in fact, if you're a fan of Dr. Murthy, you know that he was actually Surgeon General once before. He was Barack Obama's Surgeon General. And 14 years ago or so, when he took that job, he decided that he would go out and research all of the problems that were facing the health of Americans, the obesity crisis, the opioid crisis, all of the different things that were bubbling up and creating problems for our healthcare system. And what he discovered that underlying all of these things was an epidemic of loneliness. And he wrote about this a few years ago in the Harvard Business Review. And that article was so popular, he was approached to turn it into a book that's called Togetherness. Now, if you think about this, an epidemic of loneliness, what do you mean? Well, if you go back just 5 or 10 years, the countries of Great Britain and Canada actually installed a minister of loneliness into their government to study these problems. So this isn't just an American problem. This is a worldwide problem. People are feeling more disconnected. But wait a minute, Tom, didn't we get Twitter? Didn't we get Facebook? Didn't we get LinkedIn and Instagram? Didn't all these things appear 15 years ago that were supposed to bring us closer together? Yeah, but most of the people who I speak to and the people who I interview really say that they don't have more friends than they used to. They don't have stronger business connections than they had before these tools were introduced. So this epidemic of loneliness is causing huge problems for everybody. There was also a recent study that there is a decline in friendships. These are things that academics have been studying for decades. And over the last 10 to 20 years, the amount of friendships that Americans claim to have gone down. Professor Scott Galloway from NYU recently made this survey part of his chart of the week that he puts out with some interesting factoid. And he showed that 15% of men and 10% of women claim that they don't have any close friends. And in fact, for many people, if you go back a few years, they would say that their human connections, their interactions with other carbon-based life forms took place at work. They would go to work and they would have that person in the next cubicle. They would have the conversation over at the water cooler. And what would coworkers do at lunchtime? They would get together. 4 people would cram into a car. They'd drive to a sandwich shop and they'd laugh and they'd talk and they'd have that 45 minutes together where they could have some sort of an interaction with somebody. Maybe not their best friend, maybe not the people they were spending the holidays with, but every day they had a fresh engagement with some people who they came to know, and I would argue came to care about in certain situations. And then March 13th, 2020 came along, and we were all told that we needed to social distance for 2 weeks. God, that was the longest 2 weeks that I can ever remember. That 2 weeks seemed to have lasted for over 2 years for many people. So you take an epidemic of loneliness that already existed more than a decade ago, and you combine this with sending everybody home for over a year, almost 2 years, and still going on at 3 years for some people. And now you've taken away that lifeline to people. Humans, we're social creatures. We need each other. Now, you don't have to be an introvert or an extrovert to still need to have a connection to somebody. You need to know that people care. And yet, remote work has bubbled up as the replacement for taking that commute and going on. So this problem of people feeling disconnected, it's not going to go away anytime soon. In fact, this is where I believe that trade associations and industry groups, this is what they owe the people who work in their fields. This is where we need to step up. And I run an industry group. This is where we need to step up and start offering ways for people to connect. But people don't just need a happy hour with an open bar. People don't just need a newsletter coming from the association president. People need to really feel engaged and they want that sense of belonging. Disconnectedness is real and it's happening in your industry. And the cure for that is a way to show belonging. But here's the thing. So often we get so caught up in the work that we're doing, we forget to just see the people who are around us. So even when people come to your monthly meetings or your annual conference, oftentimes they're listening to the speaker, then they're hanging out with their closest friend who they traveled across the country to be there with. And on every break, they're on their phone, checking LinkedIn, checking Facebook, calling into the office. They're not actually taking that time to really get that human connection that live events really are all about. So this is what I do. I call myself the conference catalyst. When I speak at your event, I talk to people about how to maximize being at your event and then how to take these skills back to their office and back to their communities. And as people who run associations, it's our job to set the tone for human connections and to bring value to our members. And that's why we need to think about how do we get back to the basics of human connection and how do we show people how to add humans in real life to their inner circle. This is more than likes, links, shares, and follows. Thank you.
Thank you, Thom. Appreciate that. Our next speaker is Kricket Harrison. She's a performer and a communication expert. Oops, I blew it. She's not a performer. Kricket Harrison is a performance and communication expert. Sorry about that, Kricket. First one I blew today. Oh, well. She grew up in the travel and tourism industry, spanning 4 airlines, 2 travel agencies, multiple wholesale tour operators, and outside sales companies. She knows firsthand what it's like to be on a constantly changing team and to lead one. Kricket pulls from her 25 years in the industry to share how performance, culture, and communication are the keys to high-performing teams that get great results. Joining us from Atlanta, please welcome Kricket Harrison.
Welcome aboard. Oh, those were the best 2 words I could have ever heard as I landed at one end of JFK, and you know that my outgoing flight was at the other end of JFK, but I made it. I settled into my seat. Deep breath, I could finally relax. You see, this trip had been planned for a long time. It was both a business trip and a little bit of fun, and I'd done everything you're supposed to do on your team to make sure we had this down and had it nailed. And then I heard 2 more words. It was the pilot coming over the PA system. Well, folks, now I don't know about you, but when you travel and the pilot comes over the PA system and says, well, folks, it's usually not followed by what you want to hear. You see, it seems the delay was due to partially the weather, Mother Nature at her best, but the United Nations were meeting in New York. Therefore, inbound, outbound flights were delayed. Came to terms with the fact that we may or may not make it. And the pilot then says, and our co-pilot is out in that mess and may not make it either. On top of that, some of our crew is not going to be legal if we wait more than 2 hours. So what they were doing for us was getting us a new pilot and a partially new crew. My seatmate leans over and says, you mean to tell me we're about to go hurtling through the air at 500 plus miles per hour with pilots that have never met and a crew that's never worked together? How do they do it? Well, I knew from experience they did it with exceptional training. Pilots, of course, have thousands of hours before they get in a cockpit. The onboarding is exceptional for teams. But the key that makes it work, the key that really brings it all together, is their communication skills. They use a common language. The language we've heard, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, is system-wide. It's international. But there's other language that we think about that needs to be addressed. Have you tried to order a cup of coffee lately? Different for everyone. Coffee regular in the South means you want decaf, or means you want regular, not decaffeinated. Coffee regular up north means cream and 2 sugars. See, language can be assumed to be simple, but it's not always simple. Your team has to have the exact language and tools. The next part is personalities. You get your team together, you've got good language, but we're human, so we have personalities. So how do we compensate for different personalities? we have to ask questions. We have to say, hey, what's this like for you? What's your favorite thing? We have to connect on a deeper level than what is in front of us. We have to know what our team is doing and how to see them as more than just the title and the job they have. There's another piece of this that's really important, is understanding the connection and the team, and then that piece that we talk about of generations. So we take the team and the language and the connection, and we start changing everything. You've heard the term slacking. In my day, that meant slacking off, phoning it in, doing the bare minimum. That's now called quiet quitting. Slacking is what your team is doing to communicate when they're across the nation, different offices, maybe even different cubicles. It's a way they communicate. So we factor in personality preferences, language, and connection. The next piece of this that I found really interesting growing up is this piece about culture. And culture is a blend of things. We hear so often about company culture, corporate culture, human culture. We're from different places. We're from all over the globe. Nowadays, we connect all over the globe. Just because we've had the same overall experience does not mean our personal experiences are the same. So we have to factor in what was it like for them, what's the experience like for them, and what's important to them. You know, growing up long before the airline industry, my father was in the Navy. And in the Navy, he was a fireman. Never understood that one, but apparently it's a thing. And he was stationed in Japan. Now, one of the things he taught us about culture and about people was that you're going to experience a whole lot of things. You need to be curious. You need to understand that people are different, and that's okay. And he taught us that we have to try things, not always the food, because that was always a hard one for me. I didn't have to like it. I had to respect it. I had to understand that it just because something I didn't like didn't mean it was bad or wrong. It just meant it was different than what I was used to. And more than that, I had to make sure that the other person knew I respected it, which means I had to be aware of my own sensory input, output, my verbal, showing. What did I look like? Nonverbal communication. But there was one other thing he said. In the Japanese culture, respect is hugely important. And respect is important no matter who you are. And there was a phrase he taught me, Otsukara sumadishita. Now, loosely translated in my Southern twang just a bit, it says, I respect the work you've done today, or I honor the work you have done. It doesn't matter who you are. In our case, it didn't matter if it was the pilot, or let's face it, the mechanic, who in all aspects might even be the most important person around, or the ground crew, or the person cleaning the plane so that we could get on it. Every job is important. And when I speak to companies and I say to them, do you have money laying around where you just hired somebody because, you just felt like it? And if you do, that's a whole nother conversation, but most people don't. Nobody hires somebody just to hire somebody. There's a job that needs to be done. Every job is important. So honor them, show them. People who leave citing toxic reasons generally then say it comes down to some type of salary or other issue. What it really comes down to is them not feeling heard, seen, or respected or acknowledged. See, that's something that they had nailed. When you have a team that you can honor, show respect for, create the culture of respect, connect with your employees, and use a communication and a language style that everyone understands, you create high-performing teams. I'm Kricket Harrison, Otsu Kamasumadishta.
Thank you, Kricket. I appreciate that. Our next speaker is Robert Bradford. He's a pioneer in the field of strategic planning and management. One of Robert Bradford's key contributions was his emphasis on the importance of aligning organizational goals with key results. Robert's company, the Center for, sorry, Robert, blew the ears too. The Center for Simplified Strategic Planning. I've said that name a million times and I still blow it. Has helped clients to increase profits by over $1 billion since 1980 and includes 6 of the 10 best companies to work for in the US. I give you my good friend, Robert Bradford.
Thanks, Ed. I actually am starting this because I want to make a point later on. I do like dinosaurs, but that's not the point. I did want to correct one little thing. It's not over $1 billion. It's actually over $50 billion. So that's some real money. It adds up over time. I want to share with you to begin with just a thing that happened to me fairly early in my career. This is about 30 years ago. I've been doing this for 35 years. During that time, I was working with a client down in Atlanta. When I went down to the meeting, I rented this, it was a crummy little, it was like a white Ford Taurus, and the air conditioner broke down about halfway to the meeting site, which in July in Georgia is not a pleasant experience. I was just sweating. I had soaked through my suit. It was so bad. And when I pulled into the meeting site, I pulled into a spot under a tree where there's some shade, which even then I was still hot because it was Georgia. And I noticed in the spot next to me, the receptionist, who's this beautiful young woman named Rebecca, was pulling up next to me in a brand new Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, oh, how did she get that car? But I got out and said the nicest thing I could think of to say, which is, hey, that is a really nice car, because it's about a $250,000 car. And she just lit up and she said, I know, isn't it great? We just got our profit sharing checks. And at that point, I realized 2 things. 1, her air conditioner was working. And 2, I was not charging these guys enough money. How I did that is something I started to think about a lot. And after a few years of thinking about that, I realized my company has worked with thousands of other companies, and we came up with a lot of information. I just want to share a little bit of that information with you because I think you'll find it useful and valuable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you, first of all, there are 3 things that the best companies, out of these thousands of companies we work with, the best companies did these 3 things, and they consistently did all 3 of these things. And I'll talk to you about one of them today because I only have 8 minutes, but I want you to be aware of the other 2. So the first one, which I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit, is competency-based strategy. We'll talk about what that means in a bit. The second is strategic focus. I'm not going to tell you what that means, but it's related to the competency thing. And the third thing is a people-driven culture. So those 3 things put together were a common element of the top 1% of companies that we work with, people who saw their profits and sales grow by more than 5 times in every case. To be in that top group, you had to have huge explosive growth and sales. So these 3 best practices really stuck out. And I built a lot of my material and a lot of what I do with companies around these practices. But I want to go back to this very first one, competency-based strategy, because it's pretty important. Now, when we look at companies that succeed, you can take this list here. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can think about those and ask yourself, why is it that the people on the left are a lot more successful than the people on the right? The people on the right are big companies. They're good companies. They have great management teams and great practices, but the people on the left are better off. And why is this? The answer comes down to a distinction that the people on the left, Disney, Nike, Honda, they have something going for them that the people on the right don't do as well. And that is, there is a way they go through a process I call the happy customer process, where you start with an unhappy customer and they go through whatever you do and they come out and they're a lot happier, but also they have a lot less money. You're happy because you got their money. They can be unhappy if you took a lot of their money, but if you make them happy enough, then they won't mind that you took a lot of their money. And Disney, I think, is a really great example of this. So what that boils down to is what we call strategic competency. Now, competency is a very specific kind of thing. It's know-how, it's knowledge, it's stuff that's in your head. And unlike any other asset you have, it appreciates when you use it. Strategic competency is that kind of know-how. It's a combination of skills, processes, and knowledge. that creates significant value for your customers and differentiates you from your competitors. So strategic competency is clear competitive advantage. And I want you to remember that idea, that it is clear competitive advantage. And where it comes from is having these two dimensions where you've got high value to your customer and high uniqueness. So what I want you to push yourself to do is always, when you think of the things that you want to work on, that you want to be great at, think about how valuable is it to the customer, and also how unique am I at it. And that's why, for example, General Motors may not be as great as Honda, because General Motors says we're great at making cars, but that's not that unique. All their competitors do it. Now, Honda is great at making small engines, which is a little more unique, and that puts them a level above General Motors, because you could actually have 5 or 6 Hondas in your garage. You could have a leaf blower, a lawnmower, and so on. So that competency raises their uniqueness and pushes them up into the upper right-hand corner here. It's a very important concept. I want you to ask yourself, how can I apply this in my own operation? Because that uniqueness is like a license to print money if you've got it right. So another way of thinking about this, when you take those things that might be competencies, is you could put them into these 3 zones. The L-shaped so what zone, who cares? If it's low uniqueness, everyone does it. If it's low value, your customers don't care if you do it. The profitable businesses in most industries are in that profit zone in the middle there, where they got moderate to high value and uniqueness. And the people that have both high value and high uniqueness are like Disney or Nike. They are making big bucks because they do something really well, and they do it better than anybody else. So I want you to think about how you can do that, because when you're in that spot, you have an island of profitability where you make huge amounts of money and other people can't touch you. If you stay focused on that, your business will always be ahead, will always have that significant competitive advantage I was talking about. So will this pay off? Well, you think about that Rolls-Royce example. Absolutely, it did pay off for them. I'll give you one other example that I went through fairly recently. I worked with a forms company that made tax forms. Not very exciting, but one of the things we were facing that I said when I walked in was, we're going to be out of business in 10 years if we don't change this business, because people aren't going to be filling out paper forms anymore. And so we wrestled with that, and we said, well, what is the know-how we have? And what the know-how we had was compliance with the tax regulations. And so we actually took that and said, how is it going to be applied 10 years from now? We took a lot of cash out of that business and bought a software company. And now that company actually does the tax form side of most tax software that you might buy in the US today. And so that company went from a business that was plummeting. I think today they're doing 1/10 the sales they did in paper when we started, to where almost all of their business is online, software available tax data rather than the paper itself. It was a hard thing to do. Did it pay off? One morning, about 3 years into this, all their employees went in and found that the owner of the company decided he was going to get out of the business, and he gave each of them stock. Each employee got stock worth in excess of $350,000. So it paid off for them big time. They're much bigger than they were when we started, and they would have been a disaster if we hadn't done it. So think about how to apply that for yourself. Think about how it can pay off for you. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you got a lot out of that, and I hope it makes you think.
Thank you, Robert. Need you to close down your screen share so we can move on. There we go. Thank you, Robert. Okay, let's move on to our next, actually our last speaker, and it is Mitch Seehusen. He inspires high-performing sales teams and CEOs globally. He is the former chapter president of the National Speakers Association, Mountain West Chapter. Mitch previously worked in technology sales and sales management for more than 30 years, leading mid-sized to Fortune 100 companies. Mitch is a futurist with a keen view on developing trends and markets, and while developing his twisted sense of humor and the love of a great story. I give you Mitch Seehusen.
Hello. A couple of years ago, Captain Steve came to Salt Lake City. That's where I live. And his overall goal was to go skiing at Park City Mountain Resort. Okay, sounds great. So bright and early, one January morning, we get all geared up, get ready to go. And this is what Captain Steve decided to wear because he's kind of an outdoors guy. So he put on his hat, put on his glasses, put on his parka, and up we went to the Park City Mountain Resort. Once we got up there, oh, where's his parka? Oh, his parka's right here. It's camo. That's his camo parka on. And the only thing really missing from Captain Steve's ensemble was a shotgun and the waders. So it was like he was ready to go duck hunting. Not too long into the little adventure, we get all out of the vehicle, we get all of our equipment, our gear, we get our ski boots on, we get the poles, we get the rented skis, in his case, rented skis and rented poles. And he points up to the mountain and he says, I want to go over there. I said, well, yeah, but that's the ski team lift. You really know what's involved? Yeah, that doesn't matter. I'm the guest here. You should humor me. You should take your guest where the guest wants to go. Okay, fine. So we make our way over to the ski team lift. We load up, we're riding up the ski team lift. When all of a sudden there's a great big sign that says, no unloading at mid-mountain, ski racers only. I didn't think too much of it. But as we got close to the mid-mountain area, my friend Captain Steve just stands up and skis right off the lift at mid-mountain. I'm thinking, holy crap, what are you doing? And then I can hear a young lady who's the mid-mountain lift operator saying, excuse me, sir, excuse me. You're going to have to get back on the lift and go to the top because this is ski racers only. So I make my way to the top of the mountain. And like the host that I am, and a good friend of Captain Steve, I wait patiently, or in this case, impatiently, for him to arrive. He gets to the top of the lift, he skis off, and he's very indignant. He says, what? Could she not tell? Why? How did she know I wasn't a ski racer? I'm like, how did she know you weren't a ski racer? Bud, do you have a mirror? Do you know what ski racers look like? He's like, what's that got to do with anything? It's ski racers only. They're running a race. It's the ski team lift. It's important to know where you are at all times. Now, Captain Steve is so dedicated to his outdoor lifestyle. He really only shops at 2 stores, Cabela's and Bass Pro Shops, because it's Cabela's for the wintertime, for duck hunting, goose hunting, pheasant hunting, wildebeest hunting, perhaps. And in the summertime, it's all about walleye fishing. Okay, well, come on, bud. Take a little look at what ski racers look like. Ski racers, they dress a little bit differently. Like, for example, they have like a satin racing suit, kind of fancy. They may have the name of their country on there, like USA, for example. They wear big fancy gloves. They have a total satin suit. Their skis are extra long and curled up at the end. Their poles are bent. And they all wear fancy helmets with goggles. This, Captain Steve, is what the ski racers look like. So the instant you got up there with your parka, your hat, she knew instantaneously you weren't a ski racer. And that's why she made you sidestep all the way up the mid station to get on the lift and ride to the top. The important thing that we realize or need to realize in all of our businesses is that perception is the truth. So many sales organizations fail to recognize and realize that the perception of their salespeople, the perceptions of their sales managers, how they see the market, how they see the customers is the most important information. The relationships that your salespeople have with your customers is most important because they are your company. Your salespeople are your company. It's sort of funny how some CEOs and presidents of sales organizations think that it's all about them. Unfortunately, a couple of months ago, I was online at a global Zoom meeting with one of my clients. I won't tell you who they are, obviously, and I won't tell you what they do, but I will tell you that they are a global company. About 10 minutes into the meeting, there was over 100 people on a worldwide basis that was on this call. The CEO and a top leader in the organization got into a disagreement. And got so serious that the CEO fired the key person on the spot. Wow. Talk about embarrassing. The fallout was even worse. Remember, perception is the truth. Of those 100 people that were in that organization that were the top sales and engineering people worldwide, over half of those people resigned or quit or took positions with other companies. How sad that is, that he, as a company owner who's owned his own business and run this business and built this business for more than 30 years, could behave this badly in front of his entire organization and not seem to think that there was anything wrong with it. Well, it gets worse. Over the next few weeks and the next few months, he prided himself on the fact when every week when this recurring call would come along, that they were just fine without this person, and that he, as the CEO, the person with the ultimate vision, was now performing the tasks of the person that he fired and actually doing a much better job than the person that he fired. And proudly said one day, why did we have that guy in the first place? Wow, very sad. The second point that I'd like to talk about is belief always precedes success. Your employees, particularly your sales employees, must believe in your mission. They must believe in the products that you make. They must believe in the markets that you go to. They must believe that the products that you sell will solve the customer's needs, will solve the customer's life better for the customer. If they don't do this, then they will soon find a place somewhere else. They'll become a winning person on someone else's sales team and drive their company to the top. Do all companies behave badly? No, hopefully not. Most of them behave very well, and all of the people that are part of the company do a great job. But unfortunately, there are some bad actors out there. When we do what we say what we'll do, and when we keep our word, and when we trust our employees that they are managing the relationships and that they are the face of our company, then true growth will happen. I enjoy working with companies throughout the world. I enjoy working with global technology companies and helping to leverage the technology that they have, helping them to take advantage of the patents that they have and take advantage of the markets that are growing at rapid rates. My name is Mitch Seehusen, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate that. And as I promised earlier, we will bring Dale Irvin back for a second edition of Dale. Dale, take it over.
Thank you, Ed, and thanks everybody for sticking around. Here is going to be the summary of the last four speakers that you heard from. First off was Thom Singer, is the author of 4 books. I know Thom, and it's a fact that he has read even more than that. So, and he said that you can't sit still because we're moving too fast like a train going through a tunnel. May I just suggest perhaps decaf? Would slow you down just a little bit, make things easier. And he said, imagine, this was interesting, imagine if Congress behaved like a community. And I think that's a great idea. I think a congressional bake sale would bring them all together. Everybody brings a cookie or pies or something, and they would all do, or perhaps like we had in high school, pizza day. That's always good. And then the United Kingdom and Canada have a minister of loneliness. Nobody's ever seen him. He just stays to himself in his own apartment. And 15% of men and 10% of women have no close friends. Probably because nobody likes you. That would be what I would say. And then he said, we like to talk together. And there was a period in 2020 where he had to socially distance for 2 weeks. He said it seemed like 2 years. It has been 2 years, okay? 2020, 2022, it's been 2 years. And finally, what did I write down here? Oh, he's a convention catalyst, And I don't really know that, but that means I wrote down convention communist, and I figured, no, that can't be. And then we heard from Kricket Harrison, who is talks about performance, but is not a performer. The ideal of do as I say, not as I do. And it said the best words she ever heard were welcome aboard when she made her flight at JFK, followed by, well, folks, the UN is in town. We don't have a co-pilot. The crew's going to expire. So fasten your seatbelts and suck it up. And she said, slacking is how your team now communicates. Slacking. And that's when you have two tin cans connected by a string. And when you pull the slack out of them, you can talk into them and hear the other one. That's good. And her father was a fireman in the Navy. And I'm thinking that had to be a pretty cool job because it's never like you're very far from water. You know, you can always put the fire out. And she said, nobody hires anybody for no reason. Yes, they do. They're called no-show jobs popularized on The Sopranos. They do exist. Then we heard from Robert Bradford, who is the head of an organization that Ed can't pronounce, but it's important. And he started bringing out those dinosaur toys. Says, I'll get back to this, but you never got back to the dinosaurs. So I can only assume you're pretty weird. And then early in his career, he rented a car in Atlanta in the summertime and the air conditioning didn't work and he was sweating all the way down to the client. And then he saw the receptionist pull in a Rolls Royce and you know, started talking. I would have immediately asked, excuse me, can I sit in there for just a minute? Just a minute before I go on. I'll try not to sweat. And then he talked about the happy customer process, which I've heard about, but I've never experienced. I imagine that's something to behold. And then go for high value and high uniqueness. And if you go to that corner of the high value, high uniqueness, that's where the big bucks are. And I think the concept of high value and high uniqueness is how they sold cryptocurrency to start with. And the big bucks in that case aren't yours. Okay? You're never going to see that. And finally, we heard from Mitch Seehusen, who's a futurist, and he started off by showing us his Captain Steve costume, which was very nice that you put that on. And Captain Steve wanted to go down the ski racers hill, and so they got on the thing, and then he was going to get off mid-mountain, and they said, no, you have to go to the top because you're not a ski racer. And he said, how did they know that? Primarily because you're dressed like a guy from Duck Dynasty. And then he showed off his ski racer costume. Apparently, the man likes to play dress up, and that's all right. And finally, he said, perception is the most important thing. Perception is the truth. So let me summarize it by saying, if you perceive to achieve and conceive while taking a leave, you can believe. So there you have it. That is my summary. Please go to my website, sign up for my Friday Funnies, absolutely free. I will make you laugh in your email every Friday in a video and written form. And bring me to your next meeting and let me give you the happy customer experience.
Very good, Dale. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody that presented today. Thank you to all of the people that were watching live. And just to remind everybody, you can go to the Virtual Speakers Hall of Fame. You can watch all of the past showcases, and each speaker will have their own page in the directory. Catch you later. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye now.